vessel of fortune for the Lord Jesus Christ, sailing the seas of culture, a real heist. Come along for a view that's unique and so true, an adventure with Rick, the Pivateer's crew.
Welcome, Levitical Kingdom Privateers, to another Privateers Volley. I'm Rick, your host, and we have a lot to talk about today. I know there are probably some people who come by the Privateers Volley and they say, Rick, if you just didn't hold the particular eschatology that you hold, I could get into what you're doing a lot more because, I believe in this futurism, or I believe in whatever, a brand that they happen to put on eschatology these days. They've given everything a name. So, and I know there's a lot of people who, when they see what it is that I'm talking about, they say, he's way out there. He's way to the right. I don't want to listen to this guy. And that's okay. Maybe it's not for you, but for those of you who think deeper, who want to know for sure, and who want to examine the world as it is today, this thing that we call stewardism, and this thing that we're developing. And we want to talk about how education fits into the idea of stewardism. For those of you that are interested in that, stick around. This is going to be a very interesting conversation. Because something really interesting happened in the mid-1800s up through the 1900s and even up to today. There was a rise in the sophisticated version of Babylon. Babylon, up to this point, had always been this idea of bringing people together into a collective thought pattern, kind of a circle logic amongst a group of people in order to benefit the one who is controlling that collective, that collectivism. That's always been the Babylonian system in a nutshell. Think Babylon, where Nimrod brought most of the people in the world together in one mind and one accord. It's even said that it took an entire year to get up to the place where the brick was to be laid. There's conversation in some of the in some of the apocryphal texts, which are biblically supported. I mean, let's be real here. And I'm not going to, in your face, call it scripture, but I'm going to tell you that a lot of it is very historically based, and I think we should pay attention to it. And one of the things that we learned in some of the apocryphal texts is that it took a year for them to get up to the top to lay a brick. And if somebody lost a brick on the way up, they mourned over that brick more than if a man fell off to his death. That tells you the kind of psychopathy, or whatever that word is, that people had in those days. They were truly of one mind. They were going to be gods, and nothing was going to stop them. What we have witnessed in the mid-1800s through the Industrial Revolution and up to today is a rise of a sophisticated Babylonian system. It's a Babylonian concept. And little by little, it has engulfed not just the West, but the world. But it starts in the West because in the West we have this ideology that's semi-biblical, but it's also very capitalistic. And the problem with taking capitalism and a biblical concept at once is that we know that the root of all evil is the love of money. And the rise of this sophisticated Babylonian concept involves manufactured problems to solve and money to be loved. We know that uh, the baron, the barons of the day, the people who are in charge of um, of swaths of people have taken advantage of consolidated groups of people for a very, very long time. And that is what the Babylonian system is. So today, what we're going to talk about is how that is, number one, a suggestion that we need to think about as far as even our eschatology. And if you're sick about me talking about that, then I apologize, but I'm going to go deep today. I'm going to go super deep, and we need to have this conversation because I really believe that we can start putting together a historical picture that helps us understand who we are, where we are, and how we have gone off the rails starting in the mid 1800s up to today, because there was an explosion of technology. The Industrial Revolution was not a slow ease where inventions were coming up through the 1600s and 1700s, and it hit us absolutely boom. It boomed. There were inventions coming out left and right, from the idea of electricity to the idea of to the idea of actually putting that together with circuitry and creating lights and light bulbs and all those kind of things. We had so much innovation happen in that time and in that place that it begs you to think what might have caused that innovation. Why is it that we went through a period of time where there seemed to have been no significant invention? Why is it we went through a period of time where it seems that we developed incredible architecture? And for what purpose? So that a small gathering of people could come together? That there is just so many questions that are laying there for us to look at and discover and ask these questions. And how does this all pertain to education? Well, I'm going to explain how it pertains to education. I think it's a fascinating study because we all know the scriptures say very clearly that as far as our sons and daughters go, we are to raise them up in the way they should go, so that when they grow old, they do not depart. Well, that we is not the state. That we is not a community. It's not a village. Okay. That we, he's talking about his people and a mandate that he has on his people, that if you're going to be my people, this is how you raise up your children in the ways they should go, that when they grow old, they do not depart. That is the mandate. Now, some interesting things that I'm going to show you. Let me go to my worksheet here. Pardon me just a second as I get this up. Here we go. I'm going to make it bigger. There we go. So again, I invited my friend Grok to do some scraping of information for me so that I could understand a full picture, because that's the one thing that my friend Grok is good for. He's good at scraping information from all of the dark corners of the web and the crevices and all those things. And forgive me, the dog, somebody just rang the doorbell. So with that said, when did compulsory education start in first world countries across the earth? It's a significant question. It's an important question because we need to know, hey, did this develop over a period of time? Did it come all at once? What was the reason for compulsory education? Why did we do this? So I did some study, and these are some of the things that you'll find. Is that compulsory state mandated education in the first world? I'm not talking about second, third world countries. Those are countries that don't have significant organization. You can't really, ask the question about those type. Okay, but the state mandated education in the first world developed countries generally emerged in the 18th, 19th centuries with roots in earlier Protestant Reformation efforts for religious literacy, later expanding for nation building, industrialization, social control, and economic modernization. Now, this is the official story. This is the official story that was pulled up, that was scraped from all over the historic parts of the internet. But what I want you to see is let's go down through a list here. Oops. Here we go. Now, the exception to the rule is Germany, Prussia. There was an early effort to bring compulsory primary education in the 1760s by Frederick the Great, and there were earlier local efforts from the 16th to 17th century in German territories. But I want to remind everybody, the German territories are exclusively Christian. They always have been, okay, exclusively Christian. These people were significantly Lutheran-leaning groups, okay, the German territories. So I want to remind everybody that when we talk about compulsory education in a Christian-leaning, centered group of people without capitalism, that they have a system that is very archaic, okay, in the sense that it was before capitalism. This was just an effort to teach the right things, all right. But if you look at the modern world, since let's call it the invention of the United States, post 1776, post 1789, since the invention of the United States, you'll notice that England, Wales, 1880, France, 1881, 1882, United States, 1852, spreading gradually until all states by 1918. Japan, 1872. Canada, 1871. Australia, 1871, 1870s. Other Western, Northern European nations, Netherlands, 1900s. Scandinavia and Denmark in the 1814. Denmark, of course, being influenced very much by Prussia, 1739, and Sweden, 1842. So look at that pattern and ask yourself, we've been told this narrative that these nations of the world all hate each other and that we're competing for the same resources. We've been told this narrative that this country is more sophisticated than that country, and we've been built all this stuff for a very long time. Yet, in a very small window of time, every country mandates compulsory education, state-mandated education. What changed? What happened in that time that made these nations go from, hey, you have the responsibility to teach your kids in the way they should go so that when they grow old, you do not depart, because the Bible was the mandated way for a very long time during that time. The Bible was at the top of the charts when it came to following a particular code. But what happened in the 1860s, 70s in America that changed everything all across the world? If you haven't guessed it by now, we had this thing called the Civil War that kicked off in the 1860s. And that Civil War was actually it was way more than just a slavery war. It's had way more to do with what they called state rights, which when you extend that, is international policy. Because the United States was the land that was going to be transformed into this place of liberty. And the reason I'm doing the quotes is because at this moment, as I continue to study down this rabbit trail, I'm not sure if it represents the liberty that we have in Christ or if it represents someone else who was freed after 1,000 years. I'm not sure. And it's because of looking at these type of things that I have these questions, and that's why I needed to look at this. So what is it that happened in the 1870s that changed everything all across the world? Well, the United States Corporation. The United States Corporation, which is a physical corporation that captured the entirety of America and showed the rest of the world how to do it, is the thing that's the common thread among all these first world countries. Boom, 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 boom. Everybody doing the same things at the same time. Now, maybe you don't think that that's very strange. Okay, let's continue. And of course, they continue to give these stupid historical reasons. Hey, because of labor and because of factories and kids working in factories, they had to mandate state education because it was just a big problem. Well, yeah, okay, there was some problem, but it was state created, and I'm going to show you. So before compulsory education, I asked my assistant, Grok, before compulsory education, who controlled the education of the young? Now, Grok is scraping stuff off the internet, and some of his sources were very interesting. But here's what Grok said. Before the widespread compulsory state-mandated education in first world countries, control over the education of the young was primarily decentralized and rested with families. That sounds scriptural. Religious institutions. Sounds scriptural. Especially churches. Local communities. That's where we start getting in the weeds a little bit. Private tutors. Okay. Probably for the oligarchs. And apprenticeship systems. That was extremely well used and well formatted during those times. In fact, if you look at stories that are represented to have happened in the early 1800s, Charles Dickens stories, all kinds of stories that are out there, they're always going to involve apprenticeships because it was a common thing for an education system. It was not about a child sitting down and studying history and science and math and English or whatever, particular subjects. And then at the end of the day saying, hey, you've got a certificate of mastery. Now go out in the world and make your way. No, there was a much more sophisticated system. And we're going to get into that at the end because I'm telling you what our system should be. And I'm going to get into that. But churches and religious institutions, local communities and towns, again, the one-room schoolhouse, the dame schools run by women, these type of things. We started to get a little bit in the weeds there, but there was still a solid centering on Jesus and the Bible. You can look into those one-room schoolhouses. It's clear that the scriptures were part of that curriculum. So there was a time when there was some significant scripturally centered education, and it was before the mid 1800s. It's clear. Okay, so let's go to the next question that I asked my assistant Grok. When were labor acts adopted across the world, across first world countries? Because if you can ask yourself, well, okay, when did they mandate compulsory education? And then they're going to give you the excuse, well, yeah, we had to because there were all these problems going on in factories and labor laws needed to be created and, so on and so forth. What if the labor law things match up with the compulsory education things? Well, voila, mid 1800s. United Kingdom had some cotton mill acts, key factory acts that were pre mid 1800s, but they didn't get into their labor laws that pertain to children until after the incorporation of the state. Interesting. Prussia, Germany, 1839 law that prohibited factory work under the age of 9. Is there a common thread here? Are we seeing a common thread? Prussia, Germany, very scripturally centered religious communities, 1839, already prohibiting the idea of factory work. We'll get into the factory work thing in just a minute. France, 1841, law set minimum age of 8 in larger factories and hour limits. Right at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Right at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Again, as I said in the beginning, the rise of the sophisticated Babylonian concept involves manufactured problems to solve, because you have to have problems to solve, and then money to be loved, because that's the root of all evil. If you're going to institute a system that is going to be rooted in evil, but has a tint of Christianity to it so people can tolerate it, this is how you have to do it. United States, there were 1836, 1842, 1916, officially, 1938. So they were all, it was all over the map, but there's a window of time after the invention of state corporations where people became no longer accountable for the actions of the state because the state's a corporation. Think about it. The only thing that you're accountable for is the interest of the state. Now, if you ruin something of the state's, they'll come after you with passion. If you take advantage of the state, they'll come after you with a passion. But if you center yourself on the interest of the state and do the will of the state, not the will of the Father in heaven, but the will of the state, you're going to be rewarded by this satanic system. Japan, 19th century. Canada, Australia, 19th century. Okay, so we're seeing a pattern. Now, I'm going to introduce to you a book. Let me make myself a little bigger so that you can actually see this. This book is one of the most important books I've ever studied from. It is a very, very difficult book to read, extremely intellectual. You have to read it 2 or 3 times each chapter before you actually get what it's trying to tell you. But this gentleman was a practicing attorney, and I'm not real big on attorned ones, but he made the case for a Babylonian system in here. He made the case for diagnosing a Babylonian system in here, and it's very important that we all understand how a Babylonian system works. The name of this book is The Excellence of the Common Law by Brent Winters. Now, the problem with obtaining this book, unless you go to American Vision, okay, American Vision has this book far cheaper. No, that's not true. Wait, Brent Winters has a website that you can get the book through for far less. Anywhere else that you go, this is hundreds of dollars. But the reason why I'm even suggesting this, because I am not a common law person, I believe the true definition of common law is the law that's common to all men, and that is God's law. That's how I perceive the common law. Brent Winters looks at it from a man's law perspective and what the common law was supposed to be in the oversight of creating a society, right? And the way he defines Babylon is one of the most important definitions I've ever heard. He defines Babylon as the culture of bringing people together in a metropolis in order to control the whole state. Because what you do, and what I've already mentioned, is that the rise of this sophisticated Babylonian concept, see, this isn't the old Babylon where Nimrod was building a tower and he had everybody in oneness and they were climbing up the stairs, and there were stories about it taking a year to get up there and laying a brick, all those kind of things. This isn't your normal, your mom and dad's Babylon, okay? This is a sophisticated Babylonian concept that can only have been created by the devil. And why it took until the mid 1800s for all this to come together, to me, is proof that there was something going on. That there was some. You don't have to believe that. I'm not asking you to believe that. I'm just telling you what I believe. But here's the deal. The rise of this sophisticated Babylonian concept has to involve two things. And Brent Winters is agrees with me on this. You have to manufacture a problem by bringing people into a metropolis. Oh, we have factories in our metropolis, and kids are being hurt. They're losing their fingers, their hands, their feet, their toes, their lips, their tongues, whatever. They're getting mutilated in these factories because they're not really prepared to be doing these things. So we need to create a new department. And that's exactly what happened in the United States. They created the Department of Labor. Now, labor was being handled by a different department beforehand, so don't go over and check me and say, "Hey, Rick, you were wrong about." No, it was being handled by a different department, but child labor in itself, exclusively child labor, was not being identified as a thing until they invented the Department of Labor for that specifically. And they created laws under that Department of Labor for residents. Residents of what? Well, by that time, it was no longer New York, New Jersey, Wisconsin, South Dakota, Arizona, Florida. It was no longer Georgia. It was a fictitious corporation, the United States Corporation. Already by that point, you were not being accounted for. You were not represented. The idea of representation, representative government, that flew the coop in 1871. Goodbye. What's represented is the will of the state. That's what's represented in the congressional monkey business that happens today. It's the will of the state that always wins. So you have to manufacture problems. Now, how do you manufacture problems? Well, let's bring 1 million people into a metropolis. Let's bring 3 million people into a metropolis. Guaranteed that things are going to happen that we have to create laws for, because public safety, because order because we need to health. Look at all these people dying of plagues because the sewer systems aren't sufficient, and so on and so forth. Look at all these people that are dying of diseases. We got to do something. We have to mandate this, and that. That's Babylon. That's the Babylonian system to a T. That is how it works. And then you have to have the other piece. It's got to make money to be loved. If it doesn't make money that can be loved, well, then it can't be the root of all evil. But because it makes money, and because the interest of the state is the money, because the interest of the state is the power, because that interest actually reflects its own root of evil, that's what makes the Babylonian system. The fact that they have accredited to each of us a number and a name in all caps, that's just the final crumbs on top of the pudding. They've just made it obvious at that point. They're like, oh yeah, when we attributed, we gave you a number and we gave you a special name that's in all caps. Yeah, all they're doing is just saying, yeah, we're Babylon, and what are you going to do about it? I'll tell you what we're going to do about it. We're going to come out of her. One of the things that I have been completely baffled by, and I'm not prepared to call out names, influencers on YouTube that I listen to, when they cover a problem that's happened, you know what they always jump back to? Well, we've got to stand up in the town square. We've got to make laws, and we've got to appoint people that are actually biblically centered, and so on and so forth. That's never going to work in a Babylonian system because Babylon necessitates laws. You can't have Babylon without laws because it's chaos. That's the thing that makes Babylon look righteous. Babylon looks righteous because it's constantly creating laws on behalf of the people that are being constantly injured in their big cities. Brent Winters, this guy, he's a genius when he put that together. I mean, other people have put it together in history, but the way he explains it in the excellence of the common law is pretty phenomenal as he breaks it down and shows us what it should look like. So let's talk a little bit about stewardism. So what does education look like in stewardism? Well, the way it looks is you raise up your child in the way they should go. Let's stop there for a second. Let's not even get to so that they don't depart from it. Let's just go to raise up your child in the way they should go. How do you accomplish raising up your child in the way they should go when they're with the education system more than they are with you? Not possible. How do you raise up your child in the way they should go when they are perceiving that they're under the same laws of metropolis as everybody else? And they've confused who those laws apply to. It's a losing battle. So the consistent, honest, obvious answer to how do we stewardism in this concept of stewardism that we're building, how do we educate our young? We remove them from the Babylonian system. And again, I've defined the Babylonian system here. Metropolis, that's the causation of the Babylonian system, because there is a love of money and there is manufactured problems. Now, what do I mean by manufactured problems? Rick, what are you talking about? You tell me that they did it on purpose? Yes. I am telling you that the more people that could get into a metropolis, think about it. This is a kind of state. The capital of the state of Florida is Tallahassee. Tallahassee is the capital of the state of Florida. So when they make laws in Tallahassee, those laws apply to strawman residents of all of Florida. So when you have people who are representing other parts of that state coming into a house talking about the problems that they're encountering, who's going to come with the most problems? It's going to be the metropolises, right? It's going to be Miami. It's going to be Tampa. It's going to be Orlando. It's going to be those bigger metropolises who come with their hands full saying, hey, we got to fix this. We got to fix it now. So it's rather obvious we have no choice but to separate ourselves from the metropolis, which leads to a Babylonian mindset. We got to bring ourselves to connect with the land, which you can't do in a metropolis, by the way. In a metropolis, you barely have land if you have any at all. You may be living in an apartment above another person. And the land is owned by, sometimes a city, sometimes a oligarch. You don't know. So how do you connect to the land in a metropolis? You can't. So you got to come out, connect to the land, and allow God to do his thing, because he is going to make provision for you through that land. That's the whole point of the stewardism system that we're talking about and developing this mindset for. We have to come out, connect to the land, and bring a mindset of, okay, we're not going to put the cart before the horse. Whatever we produce from the land, that's been given to us as a reward for putting the seed in the land. But anything that we make from that, we're going to do the work of the ministry with it. And God will supply all of your needs according to his riches and glory. I mean, the concept is not difficult. What's difficult is convincing ourselves to do it, right? That's what's difficult, because we've been propagandized since childhood that this is the way education works. and that education is important because we got to learn our 3 R's, history. We got to know the false history. Oh, excuse me. Did I say false history? We got to know the history in our textbooks. We have to know the false. I keep saying that the science in our textbooks. We got to know the arithmetic and now even like coded arithmetic, and now they even like have special kinds of maths like Common Core, and all the algebraic expressions that only 1/15 of people are ever going to use in their life, and so on and so forth. Here's a better idea. What if you actually took accountability over the children that God has blessed you with, because they are his inheritance, right? That's what the scripture says. That children are his inheritance. So as we raise them up, what if we teach them in the ways that they should go, meaning that we know what they're here for? Because we've developed them. Because we've been there all along. We see the skills and the talents and the things that God has given them. There was a time biblically that people named their children based on the thing that they perceived that God was doing in their lives. What happened to that? Do we not do that anymore? Are we so removed from this system of stewardism that we no longer provide a goal for our children by naming them the thing that we perceive that they are here for? Are we so so fearful that our neighbors are going to say, "You're controlling your children too much." Man, neighbor, get out of my face. I've been with these children for, in my case, 30 years. My oldest, still here. Why? Because I don't know totally why, but I know this. I know what he's here for, and I trained him in the way that he should go. And when the Lord is ready to use him, he's going to use him. But at the end of the day, what happened to that? Why is it that we no longer accept that kind of responsibility? Why do we allow the school to influence and determine that thing? Why do we allow the school to give them standardized testing that points them in a direction that is totally within the interest of the state? Why do we put them into special programs in special schools that literally are going to take advantage of them? I mean, there is a lot that's come out about these special programs for highly intelligent children and how it's being used to do some maniacal things. I mean, if you know anything about like the Charlie Kirks of the world, he was raised up in a particular type of schooling. And I'm not saying he's maniacal, but I'm saying that there's definitely some handling of people that happens in those situations. They're being, how do I say this on YouTube? It rhymes with broomed. Okay? So they're being broomed by people in order to do things for the state. And that's just not that's just not right. That is not the purpose that people have been put on this earth for. Our purpose is predetermined. Our purpose is predetermined in this way. We are servants of the Lord from birth. Now, whether we ever accept that or not is a different question. But we are servants of the Lord from birth. So that is the conversation that I wanted to have today. I think it's an important one, and I think it's one that we need to have more. And I'm definitely going to work it into our stewardism model and add another section to the stewardism model that literally talks about what I just talked about. But we have to come out of Babylon. There is no other way to build a culture utilizing the gifts and talents that God gives us in our children to change the world. There's no other way. We cannot do it through Babylon. It's just not possible because of Babylon's tactics. This devil that we are up against is not, he's definitely not overcomable because he's been overcome. But there's a level of cunning involved here that is amazingly cunning. To develop a system that is superior to the Nimrod Babel system, okay, to develop a system superior to that, a sophisticated version of Babylon that involves manufacturing problems in a metropolis so that you have to create laws for the whole, and then topping that with the whole not knowing that the laws are being made for resident strawmen and not you directly. You actually have the ability to say no. And by the way, a stronger ability to say no once you're authenticated. But we won't go there today. Okay? So, this is how they created conditions that we see today. So all the stuff I showed you in this live concerning how all of a sudden education protocols were put into first world countries all at the same time, and then labor laws all at the same time, should be proof that there was something going on. There was a collective move towards something that was happening in that time. It was not just because of industrialization. Industrialization sure played a part in it, because people had to move to the cities in order to get jobs. There was some funny business going on the farms. There was a time of great consternation, 1930s. The Grapes of Wrath was about that. There was some horrible weather things that were going on. All things that, in my humble opinion, caused by our enemy, allowed by the Lord, in order to forward the thing that that needs to happen. Because I truly believe that this was the step one in deceiving people and into deceiving the nations based on the love of money and corporatization, because that to me is the evidence of deception. When every country in the world becomes a corporation at the same time, creates education laws, creates labor laws, creates every other kind of law all at the same time, that tells you there's collusion. There's something going on there. Okay, this isn't no G40 summit, or this isn't the UN. This stuff was way before the UN. These are countries that at times were at war with each other, that collectively did the same things at the same time. Can you explain that? It's unexplainable. Based on the narrative that we've been fed, it's unexplainable. So I think the narrative's wrong. I think we've been lied to. One final piece of information that I got to give you. Do you know, you've heard everything about China. Worst place in the world, godless people. There's an underground church. One of the largest churches in the world's underground, and they're not allowed to speak. They have no free speech. They have no, right, all that stuff. Do you know when compulsory education started in China? 1986. Do you know when the Communist Party of China began to have a significant foothold in corporatized China? Same window. So we've been lied to. We've been lied to about a lot of things. We've been told that China bad, Russia bad, America good, all these kind of things. I am of the opinion that all of us have the potential to be good, but we are being deceived. We are being deceived, and that deception is leading us into a place of being unfaithful servants of the Lord. So in order to be a faithful servant of the Lord, the only measure we can take, in my humble opinion, is to come out of her. And coming out of her is all we talk about in the Holy Nation of the Ecclesia. If you want more information on that, email me, c2kreport@outlook.com, c2kreport@outlook.com. And remember that everything that we do here at the Pivateer's Volley, it's all about the blood. Thanks for coming. God bless.